The wound was already festering when they brought her to his door. 3 orc riders hammering against the timber frame hard enough to shake dust from the rafters, and Bennett Prescott had his hands in hot water washing instruments before the first syllable left their mouths. He did not ask questions when a life hung in the balance. The girl on the makeshift litter was barely conscious, her green skin flushed darker with fever, her breath coming in shallow gasps that made the small tusks at the corners of her mouth tremble. A boar tusk had opened her thigh from hip to knee, and whoever had tried to close it in the field had done more harm than good, packing the wound with moss that now crawled with infection. Bennett pointed to his table, the sturdy oak he had built wide enough for emergencies exactly like this, and the riders carried her inside without ceremony. The tallest one, a woman with scars crossing her arms like tributaries, kept her hand on her axe even as she helped lift the litter. Bennett ignored the weapon. He had lived on the frontier long enough to know that trust was earned in minutes or not at all, and right now the only thing that mattered was the girl whose pulse fluttered bird quick under his fingertips. "Hold her shoulders," he said, his voice flat and professional. "This will hurt." He did not wait for agreement. The wound had to be opened, cleaned, the rot cut away before it spread further. He had seen men lose legs to infections gentler than this one, and the girl was already burning with fever that would cook her brain if he did not bring it down. His hands moved with the economy of long practice, scalpel slicing through the hasty stitches, fingers probing for the pockets of pus that had formed beneath the skin. The girl screamed once, a sound torn from somewhere deep, and then her body went rigid before falling slack, unconscious. Better that way. The work took an hour. He cut away dead flesh, irrigated the wound with boiled water and vinegar, packed it with honey and clean linen. The riders watched in silence, their initial hostility giving way to something that might have been respect or might simply have been exhaustion. When he finally stepped back, his shirt was soaked with sweat and the girl's blood had dried brown under his fingernails. "She will live," he said, "if the fever breaks. The next 2 days will tell." The scarred woman nodded once. "We will stay." Bennett had expected as much. He gestured toward the corner of his cabin where he kept bedrolls for the occasional traveler. "There is water in the barrel outside. Help yourselves." They did not thank him. Orcs, he had learned, did not waste words on courtesy when action spoke louder. They settled into the corner like soldiers on campaign, efficient and quiet, and Bennett turned back to his patient. She was young. He realized now that he could look at her properly. Maybe 20, with the lean muscle of someone who lived by the hunt. Her hair, black as char, had been braided back from her face, though sweat had loosened it into damp tendrils against her temples. Even fevered and injured, there was something fierce in the set of her jaw, a pride that had not yet learned to bend. He wondered what had driven her to hunt boar alone, or if she had been alone at all. The riders had not volunteered the story, and he had not asked. He pulled a chair beside the table and began the long work of bringing down the fever. Cool cloths, changed every few minutes. Willow bark tea, spooned between her lips in tiny amounts when she was conscious enough to swallow. He tracked her pulse, her breathing, the heat radiating from her skin. Midnight came and went. The riders changed watch without speaking, one always awake, always watching him. He did not blame them. He was a stranger, a human, and their chieftain's daughter lay helpless in his care. The sky was graying toward dawn when her eyes finally opened. They were amber, he saw, flecked with green like river stones under sunlight, and they fixed on him with an intensity that would have been unnerving if he had not been so tired. "You are not dead," he said, which was perhaps not the most comforting thing to say but had the advantage of being true. Her lips moved. It took her 2 tries to form words. Not for lack of trying. Her voice was hoarse, scraped raw by fever, but there was humor in it. Bennett felt something unknot in his chest. People who could joke about their own near death were usually going to make it. "The boar tried harder than you did," he said, wringing out another cloth. "Lie still. Your leg is going to hurt like hell for a while. Feels like it already does." She tried to sit up, made it perhaps 3 inches before her strength gave out. The frustration that flashed across her face was immediate and total. "How long?" "You have been here 6 hours. The wound was badly infected. I had to reopen it." She absorbed this in silence, her gaze traveling from his face to the ceiling to the corner where her companions kept their vigil. The scarred woman raised a hand in acknowledgement, and the girl on the table relaxed fractionally. "My father," she said, "has not been notified yet as far as I know. Your friends can send word when you are stable. He will come." It was not a boast, just a statement of fact, delivered in the same tone as she might have said the sun will rise. "He will want to see for himself." Bennett nodded. He had expected as much. A chieftain would not leave his daughter's recovery to second-hand reports, especially not in the hands of a human healer most orcs had never heard of. "Then, I will make sure you are well enough to greet him." Something in her expression shifted, a softening around the eyes that might have been gratitude or might have been simple exhaustion. "What is your name?" "Bennett Prescott." "Arla Darkthorn," she paused. "Thank you, Bennett Prescott, for not letting me die." "It is my job," he said, which was true but also somehow inadequate. He tried again. "You are welcome." She closed her eyes then, her breathing evening out into the deeper rhythm of true sleep rather than fever fugue. Bennett stayed where he was, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest, until the sun broke over the eastern hills and light flooded through his window in golden streams. The scarred woman approached as he was changing the bandages the next morning. Up close, she was older than he had first thought, perhaps 40, with the weathered look of someone who had spent more nights under stars than roofs. "I am Cora," she said. "Hunt second of Darkthorn clan. I will ride back today to tell the chieftain his daughter lives. The others will stay." Bennett nodded. "Tell him she will need at least 3 weeks before she can travel. The wound must close properly or it will reopen on the road." Cora's eyes narrowed. 3 weeks is a long time. It is a deep wound. He kept his voice level, professional. "If you move her too soon, she will die. If that is acceptable, you may take her whenever you wish." For a long moment, Cora studied him, weighing something Bennett could not name. Then she nodded once and turned toward the door. 3 weeks, she said over her shoulder. "The chieftain will send supplies. You will not be left to feed us from your own stores." She was gone before he could respond, her horse already disappearing down the trail in a cloud of dust. The remaining 2 riders settled more firmly into their corner, and Bennett went back to his patient. Arla woke more frequently over the next days, her periods of consciousness growing longer as the fever released its grip. She was not, Bennett discovered, particularly good at lying still. By the 3rd day, she was demanding to sit up. By the 5th, she wanted to stand. He denied both requests with the same calm firmness he used on all his patients, which earned him a glare that could have melted iron. "I am not made of glass," she said, her tusks showing in frustration. "No," Bennett agreed. "You are made of flesh, which is considerably more fragile. The stitches need another week before you put weight on that leg. A week." She said it like a curse. "I will go mad before then." "Then go mad lying down. It will hurt less." She threw a pillow at him. He caught it, placed it back under her head, and went to prepare lunch. Behind him, he heard her laugh, just a breath of sound, reluctant and surprised. The days settled into a rhythm. Bennett tended his other patients. the handful of frontier families who relied on him for everything from childbirth to setting broken bones, and between visits, he returned to Arla. She slept less as she healed, which meant she talked more, a running commentary on everything from the quality of his cooking to the strange human habit of keeping chickens instead of hunting fresh meat. "Chickens are reliable," Bennett said, stirring a pot of stew that was mostly root vegetables and optimism. "They give eggs. You cannot get eggs from a deer." "You could if you tried harder," Arla said, and he caught himself smiling despite the absurdity. She told him about the hunt that had injured her, how the boar had been twice the size any had a right to be, how it had killed 2 dogs before she got her spear into it. The tusk had caught her as it died, a final act of defiance. Her companions had killed it properly then, but by that time, she was already bleeding too badly to do anything but apply pressure and ride for help. Bennett's cabin had been the closest, 3 hours at a hard gallop through darkness. "Lucky I was home," Bennett said. "Lucky you knew what to do." She watched him work, her amber eyes tracking his movements as he changed her dressing. "Where did you learn to heal like this?" "War," he said, which was the short answer and the only one he usually gave. When she stayed quiet, waiting, he found himself continuing. "I was a field surgeon for the Eastern campaigns. 5 years. You learn quickly when men are dying or you do not learn at all. And then you came here, and then I came here." He tied off the bandage, checked the wound edges for any sign of renewed infection. Clean, pink, healing. "I had seen enough of dying. I wanted to try saving people instead." Arla was silent for a moment. Then, "You are good at it, not always." He thought of the patients he had lost, the ones who had arrived too late or too far gone. "But I try." "That is all anyone can do," Arla said, and the way she said it made Bennett think she was talking about more than healing. 2 weeks into her recovery, she started teaching him about orc medicine. It began almost by accident, Bennett mentioning a tincture he made from willow bark for pain, Arla countering that her people used silverweed for the same purpose. He asked how it was prepared. She told him. He wrote it down in his notebook, the one where he kept every remedy and technique he had ever learned. And the next day, she offered another. They traded knowledge like merchants traded goods, his anatomy for her herbalism, his stitching techniques for her bone-setting methods. The orc riders in the corner listened sometimes, occasionally adding their own experiences with field injuries. Bennett learned that orcs packed wounds with spider webs to stop bleeding, that they used a particular moss for burns that he had always dismissed as useless. He taught them how to recognize infection before it became obvious, the subtle signs of sepsis that could save hours of treatment. It was, he realized, the most he had talked in months. Years, maybe. The frontier was not a place for conversation, and his patients usually wanted him for his hands, not his words. But Arla drew stories out of him like poison from a wound, her questions direct and unrelenting. She wanted to know everything, why he settled here, what he missed about the world beyond the frontier, whether he ever regretted leaving. "Sometimes," he admitted. "There were things in the cities I cannot replicate here, libraries, other physicians to consult." "Coffee that did not taste like burnt dirt," Arla laughed. "So go back." "No." The word came out harder than he intended. "I am needed here. There is no one else within 40 miles who knows how to set a compound fracture or deliver a breech birth. If I left, people would die." "Then you are trapped by your own competence," Arla said, but her tone was understanding rather than mocking. "I know something about that." "Do you?" She gestured toward the window, the vast expanse of forest and hill that stretched to the horizon. "I am my father's eldest. When he dies, the clan falls to me, whether I want it or not. Every decision I make is weighed against that future. every risk measured against what it would mean if I fell and there was no air. Is that why you hunt boar, perhaps? Her smile was sharp. Or perhaps I am just stubborn. Those are not mutually exclusive, Bennett said, and she laughed again, the sound easier now, unguarded. On the 17th day, Arla stood. Bennett had gone outside to check his herb garden, leaving her with strict instructions to remain horizontal, and when he returned, she was upright beside the table, her weight balanced carefully on her good leg. The bandaged thigh trembled with effort, but she was standing. "Sit down," he said, crossing the room in 3 strides. "No." Her jaw was set, her hands gripping the table edge hard enough to whiten her knuckles. "I need to walk. You need to heal. I am healed enough." She took a step, a tiny shuffle that made her breath hiss between her teeth. "My father will be here soon. I will not greet him from a sick like a child." Bennett opened his mouth to argue, saw the determination in her eyes, and closed it again. There were some fights not worth having. Instead, he moved to her side, offered his arm. "Then at least do not fall and undo all my work." She took his arm without hesitation, her grip strong despite the weakness in her leg. Together, they managed 3 steps before she had to stop, panting. Bennett said nothing, just held steady while she caught her breath. They tried again. 4 steps this time. Then 5. By the time the sun set, she had walked the length of the cabin twice, and Bennett had revised his estimate of her recovery time downward considerably. Stubbornness, he was learning, had its own therapeutic value. That night he woke to voices outside. Low, urgent. He rose from his bedroll near the fire and moved to the window, careful not to wake Arla. The 2 riders were standing watch, but they were not alone. Figures on horseback, at least a dozen, arranged in a loose circle around his cabin. Torchlight gleamed off armor and weapons. Bennett's blood went cold. He knew what this was. Who this was. The knock came at midnight exactly, 3 measured blows that rattled the door in its frame. Bennett crossed to it, aware of Arla sitting up behind him, aware of the riders moving to flank him. He opened the door. The orc on the other side was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to fill the doorway. He wore armor of layered leather and bone, and the axe strapped to his back could have split a horse in 2. His face was all hard angles, his tusks longer and more prominent than his daughter's, and his eyes, when they fixed on Bennett, were the same amber flecked with green. "I am Thargul Darkthorn," he said, his voice like stones grinding. "Where is my daughter?" Bennett stepped aside without a word. Thargul entered, his warriors crowding in behind him, and the small cabin suddenly felt impossibly full. The chieftain's gaze found Arla immediately, standing beside the table with one hand braced for balance, and something in his expression shifted. Relief, Bennett thought. Or maybe just the easing of a fear so profound it had no name. "Father," Arla said. Her voice was steady. "I am well." Thargul crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands hovering over her shoulders as if afraid to touch, afraid she might break or vanish. Then he pulled her into an embrace that was surprisingly gentle, his massive frame curving to shelter her. Bennett looked away, giving them what privacy he could in the crowded space. When Thargul finally released her, his eyes were wet. "I heard you were wounded. That you were in the hands of a human." He turned to Bennett, and the relief in his face hardened into something colder. "I heard rumors that you were kept here, against your will." "No," Arla said immediately. "Father, no. Bennett saved my life. The wound was septic. If he had not treated it, I would have died. So he says." Thargul's gaze raked over Bennett, weighing, judging. "How am I to know he did not cause the wound himself? That this is not some ploy to gain favor with our clan?" The accusation hit Bennett like a fist. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but Arla was faster. "Because I am telling you." Her voice cut through the room like a blade. "I was there, father. The boar gored me. My hunt sisters brought me here because it was closest, because I was bleeding and fevered and dying." Bennett asked nothing in return. "He worked through the night. He has tended me every day since. If you cannot trust him, then trust me." Thargol's jaw worked, his tusks clicking together. "You are my daughter. You would defend your captor if you thought it would keep the peace. And you are my father, so you see threats in every shadow." Arla's frustration was palpable. "Look at the wound. Ask Cora what she saw. Ask anyone. I am not a hostage. I am a patient, and Bennett is a healer. Nothing more." "Nothing more," Thargol repeated, but his eyes were on Bennett now, searching. "You ask nothing in return for this service. No payment, no alliance." Bennett found his voice. "I ask that she continue to heal. Beyond that, your business is your own. A healer who wants nothing." Thargol's laugh was bitter. "I have never met such a creature." "Then you have met the wrong healers." Bennett kept his tone even, non-confrontational. This was a man on the knife edge of violence, grief and fear and suspicion all tangled together into something explosive. One wrong word and it would spill over. "Your daughter was hurt. I helped. That is what I do." "Why?" The question came out like a blow. "Why help orcs? Your people hunt us. Call us monsters. You could have let her die and been thanked for it in any human settlement." "I could have," Bennett agreed. "But I did not become a healer to choose who lives and who dies based on the shape of their ears. A life is a life. That is all that matters." Thargol stared at him, and in the silence Bennett could hear his own heartbeat, too fast, too loud. Then the chieftain turned back to his daughter. "Show me the wound." Arla hesitated, then nodded. She sat on the table, unlaced her leggings enough to reveal the bandage. Bennett moved forward automatically, his hands reaching to unwrap it, and froze when Thargol's hand clamped around his wrist. "I will do it," the chieftain said. Bennett stepped back. Thargol's hands, so large and calloused, were surprisingly gentle as he peeled away the layers of linen. The wound beneath was long but clean, the edges knitting together in neat lines. No redness, no swelling. No sign of the infection that had nearly killed her. Thargol stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, he rewrapped the bandage with the same care Bennett would have used. When he looked up, something had shifted in his face. "You did this," he said, not a question. "Yes." "It should have killed her." "It very nearly did." Thargol straightened, his full height suddenly overwhelming in the small space. For a terrible moment, Bennett thought the chieftain was going to draw the axe from his back, thought his last sight would be that massive blade descending. Then Thargol extended his hand, palm up in a gesture Bennett did not recognize. Arla sucked in a breath. "Father, hush, daughter." Thargol's eyes never left Bennett's face. "I offer apology. I came here expecting an enemy and found an ally. I accused you of harm when you have done only good. For this, I am sorry." Bennett stared at the extended hand. Slowly, he placed his own palm against it, feeling the rough calluses, the warmth. Thargol's fingers closed around his, not squeezing, just holding. "Apology accepted," Bennett said, because it seemed important to say it aloud. Thargol released him, stepped back. "My daughter says you saved her life. I cannot repay such a debt with gold or goods, but I can offer this. Darkthorn clan is in your debt. If you ever have need, you have only to call and we will answer." "I do not need," Bennett began. "It is not a matter of need," Thargol interrupted. "It is a matter of honor. We do not leave debts unpaid." Bennett nodded, unsure what else to do. Thargol turned to his warriors, barked an order in the orcish tongue that Bennett only half understood. They filed out, taking their torches and their tension with them. The cabin felt cavernous in their absence. "Rest tonight," Thargol said to Arla. Tomorrow we discuss when you can travel. I can travel now, Arla said. You can barely walk, her father countered. We will discuss it tomorrow. He left, ducking through the doorway, and the remaining riders followed. Suddenly, it was just Bennett and Arla again, the silence heavy with everything that had just happened. That was close, Bennett said finally. Closer than you know. Arla was trembling, he saw, her hands clenched in her lap. My father has killed for less. If I had not been able to walk, if the wound had still been open, he would have assumed the worst. And done what? Made sure you could not harm anyone else. She met his eyes. I am sorry. I should have warned you he would come. I knew he would not simply take someone else's word. You did warn me, Bennett pointed out, and you stood for me. That is more than I expected. It was the least I could do. She paused. Thank you for not taking offense. Some humans would have. Some humans are fools, Bennett said. Your father loves you. Fear makes people irrational. I understand that. Arla smiled, small and genuine. You are a strange man, Bennett Prescott. He could have pointed out that she was not the first to say so, that he had built a life out of being strange, of choosing compassion when others chose convenience. Instead, he just shrugged. Get some sleep. If you want to convince your father you are ready to travel, you will need to walk farther than the length of this cabin. She lay back down without argument, exhaustion finally catching up to adrenaline. Bennett returned to his bedroll by the fire, but sleep was a long time coming. He kept seeing Thargol's face, the moment the suspicion had cracked into something like respect. It had been a near thing, closer than he wanted to admit. The next morning, Thargol returned with the sunrise, and this time there was no hostility in his arrival. He watched Arla walk the length of the cabin and back, his expression carefully neutral, and when she finished he nodded. Another week, he said. Then we travel slowly. Arla opened her mouth to protest, caught Bennett's eye, and subsided. Another week, she agreed. Thargol turned to Bennett. I would speak with you. Outside. They walked away from the cabin, out into the clearing where Bennett kept his garden. In the early light, the orc chieftain looked older, the lines in his face deeper. He was quiet for a long time, studying the neat rows of herbs with something like approval. You grow medicines, he said. I do. Easier than relying on merchants who may or may not arrive, Thargol nodded. Self-sufficiency is wise on the frontier, he paused. My daughter tells me you have been teaching each other your methods for hours. We have. Bennett waited, unsure where this was going. That is good. Knowledge should not be hoarded. Thargol's gaze shifted to him. I have a proposition. I am listening. Our clan has no dedicated healer. We rely on elders who know herb lore, warriors who can set bones. It is enough, mostly. But there are injuries, illnesses that need more. Things we cannot treat. People die who should not. Bennett understood immediately. You want me to treat your people? I want more than that. Thargol's voice was measured, careful. I want an alliance, a formal one. You serve as healer to Darkthorn clan. In return, we supply you with whatever you need, protection, food, materials for your medicines, anything. It was a generous offer, more than generous. It was also complicated in ways Thargol might not fully appreciate. The frontier families I serve now, Bennett said slowly, they will not like me treating orcs. Some would stop coming to me altogether. So let them. Thargol's tusk showed in what might have been a grin. If they would rather die than share a healer with orcs, that is their choice. It is not that simple. I am the only healer for miles. If they stop coming, they stop getting care. Then they will learn to swallow their pride, or they will suffer for it. Thargol's tone hardened. You said a life is a life, Bennett Prescott. Did you mean it, or were those just words? Bennett met his gaze. I meant it. Then prove it. Treat my people as you would treat yours, not as a favor but as a duty. Stand for us the way my daughter stood for you." It was a challenge and an invitation wrapped into one. Bennett thought about the risks, the isolation it might bring, the families who would call him a traitor or worse. Then he thought about Arla, about the wound that had nearly killed her, about all the other orcs who had died because there was no one to help them. "I will do it," he said. "On one condition." Thargol's eyes narrowed. "Which is?" "That you do not expect me to turn away humans who need help. The alliance goes both ways. If someone comes to me bleeding, I treat them, orc or human. No exceptions." For a moment Thargol was silent. Then he laughed, a deep rumbling sound like distant thunder. "You drive a hard bargain, healer. Very well, we have an agreement." They clasped hands again, and this time it felt like something more than apology. It felt like a promise. The week that followed was the strangest of Bennett's life. Thargol and his warriors camped outside the cabin, turning the clearing into a temporary settlement. They hunted, bringing back deer and rabbit that they shared freely. They repaired his roof, which had been leaking since spring. They sparred in the yard, their practice bouts drawing Arla to the window to watch and offer commentary that was equal parts encouragement and mockery. Bennett continued to tend her wound, watched it heal with a satisfaction that never got old. She was walking without assistance now, her gait almost normal when she did not push too hard. The muscle was rebuilding, the scar tissue forming properly. In another 2 weeks, she would be fully recovered, though he cautioned her against hunting boar for at least a month. "A month," she groaned. "I will go mad." "Hunt something smaller," Bennett suggested. "Rabbits are less likely to gore you. Rabbits are boring. Boring is better than dead." She could not argue with that, so she settled for glaring at him instead. It had become a familiar pattern, this back and forth, and Bennett found he enjoyed it more than he probably should. There was something refreshing about Arla's directness, the way she said exactly what she thought without varnish or pretense. It was a stark contrast to the careful politeness of his human patients, who thanked him profusely even as they resented what they owed. On the 5th day of that week, Arla asked him to walk with her. Not around the cabin, but outside, through the forest trails he used for foraging. Bennett hesitated, aware of her father's eyes watching from across the clearing, then nodded. She was steady enough now, and the exercise would do her good. They walked in companionable silence, Arla pointing out plants she recognized, Bennett naming the ones she did not. The forest was lush with late summer growth, the air thick with the scent of pine and loam. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in dappled patterns, and somewhere in the distance, a creek burbled over stones. "I will miss this," Arla said suddenly. Bennett glanced at her. "The forest? This?" She gestured between them. "Talking, learning, you," the words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. Bennett did not know what to say to that, how to respond to the thing he had been carefully not thinking about for days. He settled for honesty. "I will miss you too." Arla stopped walking, turned to face him fully. "Then come with us." "What, when we leave? Come with us." Her eyes were bright, intent. "You said you would be our healer. That does not have to mean staying here and waiting for us to bring you the wounded. You could live with the clan. Travel with us." It was a ridiculous idea. Impossible. Bennett had built a life here, a practice, a home. He had patients who depended on him, routines that worked. Uprooting all of that to follow an orc clan into the wilderness was madness. It was also tempting in a way he had not expected. "I cannot just leave," he said, which was not quite a refusal. "There are people here who need me." "And there are people with the clan who need you too," Arla countered. "More of them. You would save more lives, help more people. Is that not what you want?" "It is not that simple." "Why not?" She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of green in her amber eyes. You said you came to the frontier to save people, so save them, all of them, not just the ones who look like you." "That is not fair," Bennett said quietly. "I have never turned away an orc." "No. But you have stayed in a place where orcs cannot easily reach you, where we have to ride hours to find help. That is not the same as being available." She was right, and they both knew it. Bennett looked away, his gaze traveling over the forest, the trees he had walked among for 3 years. He had chosen this place because it was remote, because it was safe, because he could help people without the complications of politics or prejudice. But safety was just another word for isolation, and isolation meant people died who did not have to. "I need time to think about it," he said finally. Arla nodded, her expression softening. "Think quickly. We leave in 2 days." They walked back to the cabin in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who had said what needed saying and were content to let it settle. When they emerged from the trees, Thargol was waiting, his arms crossed over his chest. "My daughter is trying to steal you," he said without preamble. Bennett blinked. "You know, I am not blind." Thargol's gaze shifted to Arla, fond and exasperated. "She has been talking about it for days. How much you know, how much you could teach our people, how foolish it would be to leave you here." "And what do you think?" Bennett asked. "I think she is right," Thargol said bluntly. "But I also think you cannot be forced. If you come, it must be your choice." "It would mean leaving everything I have built here." "Yes, it would also mean building something new." Thargol's expression was serious. "I will not lie to you, healer. Life with the clan is not easy. We move with the seasons, following the herds. You would live in tents, not cabins. You would treat injuries in the field, not from the comfort of a table. It is hard work and there are no guarantees." "But," Bennett prompted, sensing there was more. "But you would not be alone," Thargol said quietly. "You would have people who value what you do, who understand it, who would fight to protect you the same way you fight to protect them." He paused. "My daughter sees something in you, Bennett Prescott. I think I see it too. You are a healer, yes, but you are also a warrior in your own way. You fight death instead of enemies. That is a fight I can respect." Bennett did not know what to say to that. No one had ever called him a warrior before. He had always thought of himself as the opposite, the person who cleaned up after warriors were done. But maybe Thargol was right. Maybe healing was its own kind of battle. "I will think about it," he said again, and Thargol nodded. That night, Bennett lay awake long after the camp had settled into sleep. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows on the cabin walls, and outside he could hear the soft murmur of orc voices keeping watch. He thought about his life here, the predictability of it, the safety. He thought about the patients he would leave behind, the families who relied on him. Then he thought about Arla, about the way her eyes lit up when she learned something new, the sharpness of her humor, the strength in her hands when she gripped his arm. He thought about the way his heart had lurched when Thargol had burst through his door, not from fear but from the sudden understanding that Arla would be leaving and he might never see her again. That was the thing he had been avoiding, the truth he had not wanted to name. Somewhere between the midnight arrival and the slow weeks of recovery, he had stopped seeing Arla as a patient and started seeing her as something else. Someone else. A person he wanted to keep knowing, keep talking to, keep learning from. The realization should have been frightening. Instead, it was oddly clarifying. When dawn came, Bennett rose and went outside. Thargol was awake already, sharpening his axe in the pale light. He looked up as Bennett approached. "I will come," Bennett said. "For a trial. 3 months. If it works, I stay. If it does not, I return here and we revisit the alliance." Thargol studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "That is fair. 3 months. I need a day to settle things here, to tell my patients where I am going, to pack what I need. Done. We leave the day after tomorrow." They shook on it, and Bennett felt the weight of the decision settle into his bones. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, the kind of leap he had not made since leaving the army. But it felt right, in a way staying had not for a long time. Arla was awake when he returned to the cabin, sitting up on the table with her legs dangling. "I heard," she said. "Your father has excellent hearing." "So do I," she grinned. "You are coming." "For 3 months," Bennett cautioned. "It is a trial. It will work." Her confidence was absolute, unshakable. "You will see." Bennett wanted to ask what made her so sure, but he thought he already knew. It was the same thing that had made him say yes, despite every rational objection. Some things did not need to be spoken aloud to be understood. The next day was a blur of activity. Bennett rode to the 3 nearest homesteads, explaining his decision to families who had relied on him for years. The reactions were mixed. Some understood, or at least accepted it. Others were angry, accusing him of abandoning them for monsters. He left each family with written instructions for common ailments, promised he would return in 3 months, and tried not to let the anger cut too deeply. At the final homestead, an older woman named Iris gripped his hand and looked him in the eye. "You do what you think is right," she said. "But be careful. Orcs are not humans. Their ways are not our ways." "I know," Bennett said. "Do you?" Iris's gaze was piercing. "You have a good heart, Bennett. Do not let it make you foolish." He thought about that on the ride back, about the line between goodness and foolishness, compassion and naivety. He did not have an answer. He only knew that staying felt like slow suffocation, and leaving felt like breathing for the first time in years. When he returned to the cabin, Arla was packing her few belongings. She moved stiffly, favoring the injured leg, but she was managing. Bennett added his own things to the pile. His instruments, carefully wrapped in oilcloth, his notebook, thick with years of scribbled remedies, a change of clothes and his winter cloak. It all fit into 2 saddlebags. Everything he owned, everything he was, reduced to something that could be carried on horseback. It should have felt like loss. Instead, it felt like freedom. They left at dawn the next morning, the orc warriors forming a loose column around Bennett and Arla. Thargol rode at the front, his axe strapped across his back, and Bennett found himself beside Arla in the middle of the group. She rode easily despite the injury, her posture relaxed, and when she caught him looking, she smiled. "No regrets?" she asked. Bennett looked back at the cabin, small and solitary in the clearing, then forward at the trail winding into the forest. "Ask me in 3 months." "I will," she promised, and somehow he believed her. The journey to the clan's summer camp took 4 days. They traveled slowly for Arla's sake, stopping frequently to rest, and Bennett used the time to learn what he could about the people he would be treating. Thargol was surprisingly forthcoming, describing the clan's composition, the common injuries they faced, the illnesses that struck in winter. Bennett took notes, asked questions, began to formulate a plan for what supplies he would need, how he would organize a traveling practice. The warriors warmed to him gradually, their initial suspicion giving way to curiosity. They asked about his time in the army, about the battles he had seen, the wounds he had treated. He told them about field surgery, the chaos of it, the impossible choices. They shared their own stories in return, and Bennett learned that orc and human warfare were not so different after all. Blood was blood, regardless of the color. On the 3rd night, Arla sat beside him at the fire after the others had gone to sleep. The night was cool, the stars sharp overhead and the forest around them alive with small sounds. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For coming." "For trusting us." She paused. "For trusting me." Bennett turned to look at her, her face half lit by firelight, her eyes serious. You saved my life too, you know. I was unconscious on your table. I did not do much saving. You gave me a reason to leave that cabin," Bennett said. "I had been slowly dying there and I did not even know it. You reminded me why I became a healer in the first place. That is a kind of saving." Arla was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out, her hand finding his in the darkness. Her grip was warm, strong, familiar from all the times she had held onto him while learning to walk again. "I am glad you were the one who found me," she said. "Or that we found you, however it happened." "So am I," Bennett said, and meant it with an intensity that surprised him. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, watching the fire burn down to coals. When Arla finally rose to sleep, Bennett felt the absence of her touch like a physical thing. He stayed by the fire longer, thinking about the months ahead, about the life he was choosing. It was uncertain, complicated, probably reckless. It was also the first thing that had felt right in longer than he could remember. The summer camp, when they reached it, was larger than Bennett had expected. Dozens of tents arranged in loose circles, cook fires burning, children running between the dwellings in a chaotic swirl of noise and motion. The clan numbered perhaps 200, Thargol told him, though not all were present at any given time. Some were out hunting, others scouting, still others trading with neighboring clans. Bennett's arrival caused a stir. Orcs stopped what they were doing to stare at the human riding in their midst, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Thargol raised a hand and the murmuring quieted. "This is Bennett Prescott," he announced, his voice carrying across the camp. "He is a healer. He saved my daughter's life when she was dying of infection. He is under my protection and my gratitude. Anyone who harms him answers to me." The hostility did not disappear, but it muted, shifting to wary acceptance. Bennett dismounted, his legs stiff from days of riding, and Arla appeared at his side. "I will show you where you will stay," she said. She led him to a tent near the center of the camp, larger than most, with enough room for a bedroll and a workspace. Someone had already placed a table inside, rough but sturdy, and a trunk for his belongings. It was sparse but functional, and Bennett found himself oddly touched by the preparation. "Thank you," he said. "This is good." "It is practical," Arla corrected, but she looked pleased. "You cannot treat people without a workspace." Over the next days, Bennett settled into his new role. Thargol introduced him to the clan's elders, the women who had been tending the sick for decades. They were skeptical at first, protective of their knowledge and their position, but when Bennett asked to learn from them rather than replace them, the skepticism softened. He shared his remedies, they shared theirs, and slowly, a mutual respect formed. The injuries came quickly. A child with a broken arm, a hunter with an infected cut, an elder with failing eyesight. Bennett treated each with the same care he had given Arla, and word spread. The human healer was strange, yes, but he was competent, and competence mattered more than comfort. Arla was a constant presence, helping him translate terms he did not know, mediating when cultural differences threatened to derail treatment. She knew everyone in the clan, their histories, their relationships, and she used that knowledge to smooth Bennett's path. He came to rely on her in ways that went beyond the practical, her opinion a touchstone, her approval something he found himself seeking. It was during the second week, while treating a young warrior who had dislocated his shoulder in a sparring match, that Bennett realized the truth. Arla was standing beside him, holding the warrior steady while Bennett manipulated the joint back into place. The warrior gasped, swore, and then the shoulder popped home with an audible click. Relief flooded his face. "You are good at this," Arla said as they left the tent. "I have done it before," Bennett said. Then, because the words had been building for days and he could not hold them anymore, "Arla, I need to tell you something." She turned to face him, her expression curious. "What is it?" "I did not come here just because of the alliance." The words came out clumsy, inadequate. "I came because of you, because the thought of not seeing you again was worse than any risk." Arla went very still. "Bennett, I know it is complicated," he continued, needing to say it all before he lost his nerve. "I know there are 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I have spent the last 2 weeks trying to ignore how I feel, and I cannot do it anymore. I care about you. More than I should. More than is probably wise." For a long moment, Arla said nothing. Then she laughed, a bright, startled sound. "You think I did not know?" Bennett blinked. "What?" "You are not subtle, Bennett Prescott." Her smile was warm, her eyes dancing. "You have been looking at me like I hung the moon since the 2nd week of my recovery. I was just waiting for you to say something." "You could have said something," Bennett pointed out, his heart hammering in his chest. "I could have," Arla agreed, "but I wanted to hear it from you." She stepped closer, her hand rising to rest against his chest. "For what it is worth, I care about you too, possibly more than is wise. Definitely more than is convenient." "Convenient," Bennett echoed, and then he was laughing too, the tension breaking into something lighter, easier. "My father is going to have opinions," Arla warned. "Your father already threatened to kill me once. I think I can handle opinions." "He will be insufferable," she continued. "He will take credit for this. He will say he knew all along." "Did he?" "Probably." Arla grinned. "He sees too much, that one. It is very annoying." Bennett reached up, covered her hand with his own. "I do not care if he takes credit. I only care that you feel the same way." "I do," Arla said softly. "I really do." They stood like that, hands linked, the camp bustling around them. It should have been awkward, public, but somehow it was not. It felt natural, right, like a piece clicking into place. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened. It was not easy. There were cultural differences that neither had anticipated, moments of misunderstanding that required patience and communication. But there was also laughter, shared discoveries, the slow building of something solid and real. Thargol did indeed take credit. "I knew you would be good for her," he told Bennett one evening, his tone smug. "She needed someone who could match her stubbornness." "I am not stubborn," Arla protested from across the fire. "You hunted a boar that had killed 2 dogs," her father pointed out. "Alone. That was bravery." "That was idiocy," Thargol said fondly. "Lucky for you, your healer likes idiots." Bennett wisely stayed out of that argument, though he caught Arla's eye and grinned. She threw a stick at him, which he dodged, and the argument dissolved into laughter. The 3 months passed quickly. Bennett found a rhythm to his work, his practice growing as the clan learned to trust him. He taught the younger orcs basic first aid, trained a handful who showed aptitude in more advanced techniques. The elders shared their deepest knowledge, remedies that had been passed down for generations, and Bennett added them to his notebook with a sense of reverence. Autumn arrived, the leaves turning gold and red, and with it came the clan's migration to their winter grounds. Bennett helped pack the camp, his tent coming down as easily as it had gone up, everything he needed fitting onto a single wagon. They traveled south, following river valleys and ancient trails, and Bennett marveled at the efficiency of it, the way the entire clan moved as a single organism. It was during that journey, camped beside a lake that reflected the sunset in shades of fire, that Arla asked him if he was staying. "The 3 months are up," she said. "You said you would decide after 3 months." Bennett looked around the camp at the faces that had become familiar, the people he had treated and learned from. He looked at Thargol, sharpening his axe by the fire. He looked at Arla, her hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes serious. "I am staying," he said. "If you will have me." Relief flickered across Arla's face. "Of course we will have you. You are part of the clan now." "I mean with you," Bennett clarified. "Not just the clan. You." Understanding dawned. "Bennett Prescott, are you asking what I think you are asking?" "I do not have a ring," he said, which was probably not the most romantic way to propose but was honest. "I do not even know if orcs use rings. But yes, I am asking, will you marry me?" Arla's smile was blinding. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." They married at the Autumn Gathering, a festival where multiple clans came together to trade, celebrate, and arrange alliances. The ceremony was simple by human standards but profound in its own way. They stood before Thargol and the gathered clan, their hands bound together with a length of woven cord. Thargol spoke the words of joining, his voice carrying across the crowd, and when it was done, the entire gathering erupted in cheers. Bennett and Arla's first winter together was spent in the clan's winter camp, a series of semi-permanent structures nestled in a valley that caught the southern sun. Bennett worked through the cold months, treating frostbite and winter fevers, broken bones from icy trails. Arla hunted when the weather allowed, returning with stories of tracks and close calls that made Bennett's heart stop. They fought, sometimes about her recklessness, his caution. But they always talked through it, finding compromises that satisfied neither completely but worked well enough. That, Bennett came to understand, was the foundation of any good marriage. Spring brought new challenges. A fever swept through the camp, striking down a dozen people in as many days. Bennett worked until he was exhausted, cycling through treatments, trying everything he knew. Arla was tireless at his side, fetching water, holding down patients who thrashed in delirium, cleaning up after the worst of it. They lost 2 elders and a child, and Bennett felt each loss like a personal failure. "You cannot save everyone," Arla told him gently, her hand on his shoulder as he sat outside the tent where the child had died. "I know," Bennett said. "It does not make it easier." "It should not be easy," Arla said. "If it were easy, you would not care, and caring is what makes you good at this." He leaned into her, drawing strength from her presence, and eventually the grief faded enough that he could stand again. Summer came, and with it, a messenger from the frontier. One of Bennett's former patients had fallen ill, something the local midwife could not treat. They were asking if he would come. "Go," Thargol said when Bennett brought the request to him. "You made a promise to serve both our people and yours. Honor it." Bennett rode out the next morning, Arla at his side despite his protests. "You are not leaving me behind," she said firmly. "We are partners. That means I go where you go." The journey took 2 days, and when they arrived at the homestead, the family's reaction was mixed. They were grateful for Bennett's help but wary of Arla, their eyes lingering on her tusks, her green skin. Bennett ignored the stares, focused on his patient, a young man with a lung infection that was dangerously close to pneumonia. He worked through the night, Arla assisting, and by morning the fever had broken. The young man would live. As they prepared to leave, his mother stopped them. "I am sorry," she said, addressing Arla directly, "for the way we looked at you. Bennett has told us about the alliance, about your clan. I did not understand before, but I see now. You are a healer too, in your way." Arla inclined her head, accepting the apology with grace. "We all heal in different ways. The important thing is that we do." They rode back to the clan in companionable silence, and Bennett felt something settle in his chest. This was the life he had chosen, the life he wanted. Complicated, yes. Difficult, absolutely. But also full in a way his solitary existence had never been. The years that followed were good ones. The alliance between the clan and the frontier families deepened. suspicion giving way to cautious cooperation, and eventually genuine partnership. Bennett became a bridge between worlds, treating orc and human with equal care, and slowly, the prejudices that had seemed insurmountable began to crack. Arla thrived, her strength returning fully, her hunts legendary within the clan. She took over as hunt leader when Cora retired, and Bennett watched with pride as she led her warriors with the same fierce competence she brought to everything. Thargol aged gracefully, his hair graying but his strength undiminished. He trained the younger warriors, told stories of old battles, and doted on his daughter and her human husband with an affection that was both embarrassing and deeply touching. 5 years after their marriage, Arla came to Bennett with news that made his heart stutter. "I am pregnant," she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. Bennett's joy was immediate and overwhelming. "Are you sure?" The midwife confirmed it this morning. Arla's smile was radiant. "We are going to have a baby." They told Thargol that evening, and the chieftain's reaction was everything Bennett could have hoped for. He embraced them both, his eyes wet, and declared a feast in honor of the coming grandchild. The pregnancy was not easy. Arla's strength, usually an asset, became a liability as she refused to slow down, insisting on hunting until Bennett threatened to tie her to the tent. They argued, made up, argued again. But through it all, there was an undercurrent of joy, of anticipation. Their son was born in early spring, a healthy baby with his mother's green skin and his father's brown eyes. They named him Quentin, and Bennett held him with a tenderness he had not known he possessed. Arla, exhausted but triumphant, smiled up at him. "We made a person," she said, wonder in her voice. "We did," Bennett agreed. "We really did." Quentin grew quickly, a bright, curious child who wanted to know everything about everything. He followed Bennett on his rounds, asking endless questions about herbs and injuries, and shadowed Arla when she practiced archery, his small hands gripping a bow nearly as tall as he was. 2 years later, their daughter was born. They named her Fiona, and she was quieter than her brother, more thoughtful, her gaze taking in the world with a seriousness that made Bennett smile. She had Arla's fierce determination but Bennett's patience, a combination that served her well. The children grew, and with them, the clan prospered. The alliance Bennett had forged held strong, expanding to include other clans, other human settlements. Healers trained by Bennett spread across the frontier, carrying his methods and his philosophy. A life is a life, and all deserve care. Thargol passed peacefully in his sleep when Quentin was 7 and Fiona was 5. The entire clan mourned, but none more than Arla. Bennett held her through the grief, reminded her of her father's pride in her, in their family, in everything they had built. Arla became chieftain in her father's place, and the clan accepted her leadership without question. She ruled with the same combination of strength and compassion that Thargol had shown, and under her guidance, the clan thrived. Bennett continued to heal, his hair graying, his hands steadier than ever. He trained Quentin and Fiona in the art of medicine, watched with pride as they both showed aptitude. Quentin wanted to be a surgeon, fascinated by the mechanics of the body. Fiona was drawn to herbalism, spending hours in the gardens Bennett had planted, learning the properties of every plant. The frontier changed around them. What had once been wild territory slowly filled with settlements, human and orc living side by side. It was not always easy. Old prejudices died hard. But the children who grew up in those mixed communities did not see the divisions their parents had. They saw neighbors, friends, family. Bennett and Arla grew old together, their love deepening with the years. They argued less, laughed more, fell into a comfortable rhythm that required no words. On quiet evenings they sat outside their tent, watching the stars, Arla's head on Bennett's shoulder. "You ever miss it?" Arla asked one such evening. "Your old life, the cabin?" Bennett thought about it, really thought. Then he shook his head. "No, I miss nothing about it. This is my life. You are my life. I would not trade a single moment." Arla smiled, her tusks showing. "Good answer." "It is the truth. Still a good answer." She kissed him, slow and sweet, and Bennett felt the same flutter of joy he had felt the first time years ago. Quentin married a human girl from one of the frontier settlements, a partnership that would have been unthinkable when Bennett first arrived, but now was simply normal. Fiona fell in love with an orc warrior from a neighboring clan, and their wedding was a grand affair, attended by hundreds. Bennett became a grandfather, then a great-grandfather, the years blurring together in a cascade of joy and sorrow, triumphs and losses. He trained more healers, wrote a comprehensive medical text that became the standard across the frontier, saw his methods adopted by people who had never even met him. Through it all, Arla was at his side. His partner, his love, the person who had taken a dying girl on a table and turned her into a wife, a chieftain, a grandmother. They had built something together, a family and a legacy that would outlast them both. When Bennett's hands finally grew too unsteady to perform surgery, he retired from active practice, though he continued to teach. Quentin took over as the clan's chief healer, and Bennett watched with pride as his son surpassed him in skill and knowledge. Arla retired as chieftain when her joints began to ache too much for long journeys, passing the leadership to Quentin's eldest daughter, a fierce young woman who reminded Bennett painfully of Arla in her youth. They moved to a small cottage on the edge of the clan's territory, a place where they could be together without the demands of leadership. It was there, on a warm summer evening, that Bennett and Arla sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Their hands were linked as they had been so many times before, and Bennett felt a profound sense of peace. "We did well," Arla said quietly. "Did we not?" "We did," Bennett agreed. "Better than I ever imagined." "I am glad you came that night," Arla said. "Glad you were the one who saved me." "I am glad you let me," Bennett said. "You changed my life, Arla Darkthorn. You gave me a purpose I did not know I was missing." "We gave each other purpose," Arla corrected. "That is how it works. That is how it has always worked." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the sounds of the clan settling in for the night, children laughing, adults calling to one another. It was the sound of life, vibrant and ongoing, a testament to everything they had built together. Bennett thought back to that midnight so many years ago when 3 desperate riders had pounded on his door carrying a dying girl. He thought about the choice he had made to help rather than turn away, to risk rather than retreat. It had been the right choice, the only choice, and it had led him here to this moment, to this life. "I love you," he said, the words as true now as they had been the first time he spoke them. "I love you too," Arla replied, her grip tightening on his hand. "Always have. Always will." They stayed like that as the night deepened, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that mattered. Around them, the world they had helped shape continued to turn. Children of mixed heritage playing in yards, orcs and humans working side by side, a future brighter than either could have imagined. It was not a perfect world. There were still challenges, still prejudices, still work to be done. But it was better, measurably better, than the one Bennett had known when he first arrived on the frontier. And it would continue to improve, generation by generation, until the divisions that had once seemed insurmountable were nothing but distant memory. That was their legacy, Bennett and Arla's. Not just the children they had raised or the clan they had led, but the small, steady insistence that people were people, that healing was healing, that love could bridge any divide if given the chance. As the stars wheeled overhead and the night grew deep, Bennett Prescott and Arla Darkthorn sat together on their porch, content in the knowledge that they had lived well, loved well, and left the world better than they found it. And in the end, what more could anyone ask for than that?